Hey, I want to talk about unit composition, and specifically unit composition in relation to map size. So, we'll be reviewing a few different maps and scenarios, and we won't be talking as much about any specific units, but rather unit types, like fast raiders, long-range skirmishers, heavy assault units, and the like. So, when do we make which? What's the relation to each other? And what are they good for? Well, let's find out. In our first example, we have a 2v2 on Red Comet. It makes for a packed game and short distances between the bases, little wiggle room to go around the enemy defenses. This means that speed in units is not as important, as they can't easily outmaneuver the enemy, and range is a lot more important. This way, you can easily put pressure on the enemy and harass. Bar doesn't exactly have counters. It's not like you see the enemy make that one unit, so you counter it with this other unit, and so on and so forth. It's a lot more that you have this idea about a certain objective in the game, and you want to use the right unit, or even better yet, the right combination of unit to accomplish your goal through its mechanics. So, here for example, both teams are making skirmishing units. They're accompanied with reserves and commanders, and what you want to be doing here is to keep the enemy continuously at a maximum range, to keep dishing out a maximum amount of damage, while also at the same time staying as safe as possible. With this, you use LLTs and commanders, and they're quite important to keep them safe from enemy swarming by raiders and to repair your own units. And swarming is actually a real danger to your skirmishers. They don't have the sustained damage or the HP to survive a close encounter, nor the speed to escape one. Now, here for example, as it's a small map and in the south, both sides made raiders, but since there's not so much room to go around, and there's a lot of LLTs, they don't have too much use of them. And so sometimes it's actually better to go straight for skirmishers if you won't have to worry about your flanks. Trying to go for an all-in with raiders could still be a possibility, but failure would mean a big loss of investment and a large metal donation to the opponents. So if you do see large amounts of raiders, you will have to play more careful with your skirmishing units and be prepared to defend against a counterattack. Make sure you have enough energy to degun and to shoot your lasers. Now, on a 1v1 on Red Comet, you have actually a lot more room to harass and to defend. Since there's so much space to expand, it's a lot more difficult to build your static defenses everywhere. Your regular raiders are therefore a lot more relevant a lot later into the game. Now, skirmishers can still be useful, however you can't use them to defend and their damage output is a lot lower, and they're generally quite slow, meaning that they provide only with a limited amount of pressure, which allows your opponent to expand a lot easy into other areas of the map. The enemy is able to expand faster than you can push, this leaves them at a greater economical advantage, while they use their raiders to prevent you from expanding. Therefore, a combination of both is not a bad idea, and straight up raider spam is usually actually pretty good as well. But what if you really want to push? In comes assault units. They don't have the range to outrange defenses or the speed to go around them. However, they do have sustained damage and decent HP to survive LLTs, which allows them to put a higher amount of pressure right onto the enemy front door, your opponent then has to react immediately or risk having your assault units right up into the base before too long. Early on, they still require the assistance of your commander and LLTs to protect them from raiders, as in low numbers they're still prone to being swarmed. Pairing them with your commander or response is critical to get the most out of them, and you still can't defend your expansions or raid enemy expansions to them as they're still relatively slow, and you can't chase enemy raiders, so you have to either combine them with raiders or use them as an all-in push before the enemy can expand and outproduce you. In our last example, we have a 1v1 on Comet Catcher. It's a really large map with lots of mechs to take on the map and places to expand, and it plays really differently as expanding here becomes a must, and so is preventing the enemy from expanding. This requires the faster raiders. You could make skirmishers and assault units, but they're too slow to put on enough pressure early on to force the enemy to react. This means you need your own raiders to defend. You could play static defenses everywhere, however it's a lot slower and you would slowly fall behind an enemy who doesn't do this, and basically what you're trying to do is you want to expand faster than the enemy, defend your expansions, and constantly threaten enemy expansions so they can't expand too easily without placing static defenses, without using their raiders on the defense. And thus raiders remain the most important units for most, if not the entire game. As the game goes on, raider numbers start to increase. You can use riot units to defend more easily, even if they're a bit too slow to easily attack with them consistently, and defensive structures also start to pop up everywhere, and highly concentrated areas of these make it very hard for raiders to attack them effectively, since with their low HP they usually die before even reaching their targets. Here is where assault units are again useful to punch through heavily defended areas. Even though static defenses are more efficient than the assault units, metal for metal, they need to be spread out of the entire map, and therefore they can be taken down by a concentrated attack of assault units. Be careful, as smaller numbers of assault units will lose out heavily against raiders if swarmed. But the higher number of units, the more and more the opposite becomes true. This is why it's often advised to wait until making assault units until you have enough production to mass them easily. And so, more than anything else, it's not about what unit to make, but rather what combination of units to make. They also don't have to all be concentrated in the same area of the map, but they can fulfill their separate roles elsewhere at the same time. Moreover, adapting to the situation, changing your strategy depending on what the opponent does, depending on the map situation, is absolutely crucial. Well, that's most of what I wanted to show when it comes to what units to make depending on the map size. Thanks everyone for watching, and if anyone out there is struggling, just send me a replay and I'll analyze it where you could improve, and Well, another big thanks to everyone involved in BAR and to the people working behind the scenes for all their absolutely amazing work. Thank you. Cheers!